So in relation to the 32 concessions in Peru that have been subject to a judicial process, I think it's worth pointing out that the company never lost ownership of those concessions. When the dispute arose, Plateau, who was the company we acquired obviously, successfully got an injunction from the court to avoid any ownership ever being transferred. So that was a strong first position, and when we acquired Plateau, the impact of the dispute was very much baked into their share price. It's one of the reasons why we think we got a great price for what we believe are really top quality assets. That said, since that time, we've seen a really strong judgment in our favor from the Peruvian judicial system. As expected, the regulators appealed that, which is normal in cases like this, but it would be very unusual for such a strong judgment to be overturned. And in the interim, we control the plateau anyway. We still own 121 out of 152 concessions. We're moving ahead with our work permits. We always liked the project, even if the concessions never came back. So as far as we're concerned, we own the assets, we own the concessions, and we're going to drive the projects ahead. It doesn't obviously impact any of the territories or regions that we're operating in. Obviously we're in Nevada and in Peru. For the commodities themselves, the lithium price is very strong right now, regardless of the conflict, and conflicts tend to increase commodity prices, if anything. The one side of things that might drive prices higher would be on the uranium side. As people probably know, as well as acquiring Falciani, we also picked up Makasani, being the world's 5th largest undeveloped uranium project. It's not why we acquired Plateau, but it's a really nice asset with very strong operating costs and a very strong economic assessment on it. So, I think anything that we see from it would probably be to push uranium prices somewhat higher. Ukraine is a relatively large producer of uranium, and obviously you have the Russian use of uranium, as well as places like Kazakhstan near to Russia, which people may have concerns about the long-term future for those kind of areas. So, you never want to talk about any conflict being positive for anything, but you could see, I think, to our mind, a bit of a spike in the uranium price in the short term. The reason that the US government is pushing critical minerals, and it's become a hot topic over the last few years, is that for a number of critical minerals like lithium and a number of rare earths that are used in whether it's electric batteries, technology around smartphones, a number of different technologies, the US is very dependent on overseas jurisdictions for the production of those minerals or refined products from those minerals. And so the US industry depends heavily on overseas sources. So, as you've seen tensions rise with China, which is a big refiner and supplier of battery metals globally, and as you've seen tensions recently with Russia and the Ukraine, if you're dependent on foreign sources for these minerals, it obviously introduces a high degree of risk. So there's been a big focus on finding either domestic sources of these minerals or sources in the Western alliance, if you like, that America can rely on going forward. It's a huge topic. I mean, there's a lot of minerals where, the Chinese, for example, supply about 80% of all battery metals globally. So if you're Ford, Tesla ultimately, GM, a number of major players in the US, and you're dependent on overseas sources for those, depending on how the political side goes in the world, that's a very risky position to be in.